Okay, we have gone live. Brilliant. Okay, so fair bit's been happening in sport. The Tour de France has begun today. There are some concerns about the virus in France at the moment. It'll be interesting to see if any cyclists test positive over the next month. The NBA and other sports have returned to playoff format in North America following protests starting in the NBA, where they decided to refuse to play games. They postponed them due to the ongoing protests around the US to do with police brutality. And obviously, we have the F1 Grand Prix this weekend in Australia. Brisbane, the Broncos continue to lose games even with after Anthony Seibold's departure. So that's a big talking point if you're a rugby league fan. And Penrith have won 11 games in a row for a club record, including a club record 7 straight at Panther Stadium. So a fair bit to talk about. Obviously, yesterday the signing of Thiago Silva at Chelsea's, I think, a great bit of business, obviously, by Frank Lampard, and of course the ongoing speculation about Lionel Messi's future. The Bruins, interesting. Because obviously the last 2 days, no NHL playoff games have taken place due to the ongoing protests in the US, where most of the major sports decided to have a stand down day or two, and the PGA Golf continued regardless of the ongoing social issues in North America. Is striking. The Bruins, I don't think, have played well in this playoffs. The Tuukka Rask situation as well, where he's gone back to Finland for family reasons. That the way the press reported that was pretty diabolical, I felt. I haven't really been following the playoffs this year as closely as I normally would. Normally, this is the off season, and we're discussing, free agency and trades and obviously the draft. And with the playoffs ongoing, the provisional start date is sometime in November for next season. I haven't really been following the playoffs as closely. There's been a few stories coming out of the NHL of Reardon getting sacked by the Capitals. The Coyotes giving up their draft picks due to the ongoing scouting scandal there. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the coming season. I can see some players being moved on. I don't know who's going to win the Stanley Cup, so this is a very difficult one to predict. There seems to be very open playoffs, but it's interesting. The NBA side of things, where they decided to boycott games, is interesting. Very interesting. But again, I haven't really been following the NBA or the NHL playoffs this summer. It's been a weird summer, obviously, with the lockdown, and of course the Tour de France has commenced today. So that'll be interesting to see how the tour organisers deal with the rise in infection rate in France, considering that obviously fans are right by the roadside. So that's going to be a very interesting talking point going forward. Obviously, Chris Froome not being at Tour de France this year. He's been dropped for the Tour de France squad. So that's an interesting thing in itself. And his contract is up with Team Ineos, and he'll be having to find a new team to cycle for next year. On a domestic front of things, the football pre-season is taking place right now, a condensed pre-season. Charity Shield to take place. The Women's Charity Shield is taking place right now, and Chelsea are 2-0 up in the Women's Charity Shield. And the ongoing debate about, the future of Toronto Wolfpack, and will they be able to field a team for next season in the Super League? That's an ongoing story in itself, although not much reporting coming out of Toronto in regards to that. But they faced issues with visas during the lockdown, and then they pulled out of the Super League, which led to a restructuring of the Super League and a restructuring of the Challenge Cup, later stages. So rugby league in itself, with the cancellation of the women's season and Challenge Cup, is experiencing severe financial difficulties. We know the EIHL, the Elite League, is not sure if they're going to have season take place. So that in itself is exceptionally interesting. There is a lot going on. Even so, it's still quite a quiet news front in British sport domestically until announcements are made by the Elite League in regards to their season and the NIHL, the league below about, is there going to be a season? That will be interesting. On a football point of view, there's been a couple of transfers. I mean, Leeds have just completed a transfer of a club record. Chelsea have picked up Thiago Silva. Willian's gone to Arsenal on a free. So there isn't the big, massive transfers of a Neymar level. The Messi story is still ongoing. The fact that obviously he wants to leave the Nou Camp, and Ronald Koeman obviously couldn't keep him on board with whatever rebuild and restructuring at that club. And the ongoing financial uncertainty for a lot of sports is plain for all to see, really. It's interesting. What is interesting is, as I've been watching a lot of the NRL, is what is going on at Brisbane, and I watched bits of the game last night, and I was really surprised by the lack of effort in defence on the Brisbane side of things, and how, yes, they got a couple of tries, but their lack of effort in defence and how easily they were beaten by the Roosters. It was something that I hadn't seen from a Broncos side ever. There's clearly issues within their dressing room, even though Seabold's gone and they've got an interim coach in charge. There's clearly issues there within the dressing room that are not being resolved. There's clearly a divided dressing room. There's clearly a lack of motivation, low morale, lack of confidence, and it is troubling. So whoever comes in to replace Anthony Seibold's got a very difficult task ahead of them in regards to motivating that playing group and restructuring that playing group. On the flip side, the Penrith Panthers continue to break records, club records at least. The amount of games they've won in a row is unbelievable. The Parramatta loss, I mean, since Mitchell Moses had his calf injury, they haven't seemed the same. They've been less potent in attack. They've still got one of the best defences. Yes, they had a bad loss. Every team has a bad loss. Even the great Melbourne Storm sides have been nilled before. So I don't think that's the end of the world, but I do think they've got to look at their attack, considering Brown's had his injury and is going to not be fit until the finals, and Mitchell Moses is not the Mitchell Moses before his calf injury. He's lacking a bit of form. He's lacking a little bit of confidence, and the fact that Blake Ferguson hasn't scored a try yet is also a concern down that right hand side. A lot of the tries are coming down the left hand side. There's not a lot coming down the right hand side, so the balance of the team seems slightly off. But as I say, every team, even good teams, will have a bad loss. You're not going to win every game, but I think you look at their attack and it is unbalanced, where the tries are being scored, and you look at their defence the other night, and it was off. They weren't up to speed, and they were beaten and beaten well. But you can learn more from a defeat than a victory. So they've been winning games scrappily and badly, and they've been getting over the line. I think this defeat could be a good thing for Parramatta going forward. If I'm brutally honest, I think it could be a good thing. I think in regards to the half situation, that is troubling. That Brown has been brilliant all season, especially when Mitchell Moses was off. He really took on a key role in driving them forward. But since they've both been in the halves partnership since Mitchell Moses' return, the goal kicking's been off, and the right hand side attack is not flowed as well as it should have been. Brad Takarangi, obviously, I think is going to have to play in the halves going forward as an emergency number 6. He could play at right centre. He's done that very well with Blake Ferguson in the past, and that's where they got a lot of tries last year. So I think Brad Takarangi could be crucial in injecting him into that back line as a utility back, covering positions, because I think the attack seemed off. But then you look at Latrell Mitchell's injury. He's ruptured his hamstring. He hasn't torn it. He hasn't tweaked it. He's ruptured it, which basically means the muscles exploded. He's going to be out until next season. Which is that a massive loss to South Sydney? I think it would have been a bigger loss to the Roosters last year, because they're in the position change. He's now playing at fullback. He was playing at left centre. I think he's best as a left centre. That injury, it's unfortunate and is concerning. How the injury happened. I mean, obviously the try was disallowed, but his teammate fell on his leg at a weird angle, and you can see in the replay his hamstring basically explode internally. I'm surprised they allowed him to walk off the pitch and not medicate him off. I think that's a concern that I have about a lot of NRL teams is when there's a knee or an ankle or a leg injury that they try and walk off. That to me makes no logical sense. As someone who's had an ankle injury and I got carried off, there wasn't me walking off. I got carried off when I did my left ankle in. And you know, they have to look at how they treat those kind of injuries where the player obviously wants to walk off under his own steam, bit of pride in there, but medical side of things, looking after players going forward, I mean, that's a nasty one. It's not the worst injury we've seen this season, but it is a nasty one. And that is a big loss for South Sydney going into finals. However, I think they can mitigate that with some of the other outside backs they've had who've Graham's played very, very well. Filling in on the wing and centre. They can move Johnson to fullback. I think that's his preferred position, so they don't lose too much. But I think they are going to have to rearrange that backline somewhat to mitigate that loss. But even when the Trowbridge went off, they still were the dominant team. Parramatta just weren't at the races, and part of that was down to their unbalanced attack and trying to force the play. But it's a difficult one. But looking at Penrith, they look unstoppable. I've seen Brad Takairangi do quite well as a stand-in halfback, but he's better at right centre. But I think his role in the team as a utility back is going to be required as well. I think I'm surprised I haven't played him as much. Maybe fitness is a concern there with Takairangi, but he works very well as a centre and as a emergency halfback. He's done very well in those positions in the past. I think Parramatta can learn more out of that defeat than they have done out of some of those scrappy wins where they've just got over the line, especially the win against the Cowboys, for example, very scrappy. But they got over the line and then they were nilled the following week. That's a turnaround that you wouldn't expect. On the Brisbane Broncos side of things, obviously Kevin Walters has been heavily linked with the job there. Paul Green's been linked with the job there. Whoever comes in, it's not going to be a quick fix. That is a club that is in serious, serious trouble. And the off-field dramas, including Pangai Jr.'s alleged undeclared third-party payment, could have massive implications next season for the incoming Broncos coach. If they are found guilty of a salary cap breach, they could be in serious trouble. And if they have lied to the NRL Integrity Office, other clubs will be putting pressure on the Integrity Office to, punish them. And the way I think with Peter V'landys being the ARL commissioner, we could see quite a hefty punishment for Brisbane. The Queensland Cowboys as well. I mean, the difference between the Cowboys and the Broncos, they're equal on points. Defence is where there's a difference, and the energy levels. I have never seen a Broncos side lacking so much energy this season. The two defeats to the Roosters are embarrassing. Obviously, the defeat to Parramatta, the defeat to West Tigers, the second half against Canberra. I mean, I'm a Raiders fan. I was happy with that, but that second half was absolutely embarrassing. The lack of effort and willpower, and it's just a bunch of individuals. And Staggs is a brilliant attacking centre, but either he doesn't have defensive confidence in the players around him, or he generally has defensive weaknesses that need to be worked on. And clearly, whoever's coaching the defence side of things at that club under Seibold, the defensive setup is all wrong. And from the energy levels of the Bulldogs could win a couple of games, and then Brisbane are looking at a wooden spoon. Literally, they are looking at a wooden spoon, and they're staring it down a barrel. The Bulldogs look more likely to win a game than the Broncos. Let's just put it that way. And that tells you something. That the fact that Gold Coast is the best Queensland team and are showing progression throughout this season is troubling. The fact that they've lost David Fifita to the Gold Coast, the fact that Pangai Jr. is indefinitely suspended, and there could be other things going on with that. Injuries have hampered them. Milford's contract is a disaster. Darius Boyd is, in attack, he has proved he can provide assistance in attack and pass those balls and make those runs, but defensively he's just not at the races. I don't know why they tried to play him at centre when he really is a fullback. But then you have Milford, who is he a fullback? Is he a halfback? It's a mess there, and this is a long-term issue that predates Anthony Seibold's era. This whole mess goes back to back to about 2016, 2017, when Wayne Bennett was still in charge. The fact that they couldn't keep Sam Thaiday, for example, and Corbin Sims in that forward pack, and Maguire. They lost all the leaders in the forward pack. It's a very young forward pack. The back line, well, they have some star players in there. Defensively, the organisation is all over the place completely. And Isaac Luke and Ben Teo, while they are experienced players, and Ben Teo is an experienced dual code international. Let's not forget, Ben Teo is a pretty good Union player as well and has a good skill set. They're not the solution to the problems the Broncos are facing. They are literally a year or two away from retirement at best. We know Darius Boyd's going to retire. That's a lot more experience really not being effectively used in the team. And then you look at the depth and the injuries, and they've got problems. There are some other issues as well at play. The Pangai Junior situation is something that could have massive ramifications for the Broncos and the wider game. Because if the integrity unit, and they're going to have to look at the salary cap, because Volandis has managed to protect salaries and the TV deal and done a very good job during the lockdown and during the suspension of play. He managed to renegotiate the TV deal with Foxtel and Channel 9 and make sure that the sport did return at the end of May, which no one predicted. They were saying end of June, middle of July, that kind of period. He got it back before the AFL, before any other sport in Australia, and in fact, before most sports around the world. He got the NRL back. They've got fans back in stadiums. And yes, they obviously can't play games in Melbourne for the Storm and New Zealand with the Warriors, but they've managed to get the competition going again. Yes, they've had to shorten the format. Yes, they've had to move state of origin. But the third-party payment situation with Pangai Junior could have much wider implications for the sport as a whole. And they may look at how the salary cap is structured with third-party payments and how you declare them. And if it is found out that Brisbane have lied about that, the ramifications, implications could be a lot worse, not only for Brisbane, but for the sport going forward, because other clubs have fallen foul of salary cap breaches. I mean, Cronulla, Manly, Parramatta, Melbourne. The Melbourne one, Canterbury Bulldogs. I mean, these were big scandals. I mean, the Parramatta one dragged on far too long, and you can blame Todd Greenberg for a lack of leadership there. You can look at the issues with Manly and Cronulla. They again dragged on too long. And were, I think, weakly dealt with. I think all three of those cases were very weakly dealt with. The Canterbury Bulldogs and the Melbourne Storm ones were some people felt harshly dealt with at the time. But then you're seeing a different way of dealing with the same thing, basically. Third-party payments being a key issue in those salary cap breaches. And then you look at the minor salary cap breaches, and every club has been guilty of them at some point in the last decade. So if this comes out as true, that they haven't declared it, and he's owed this money because he's signed contracts, then the wider implications are much bigger, and then the whole thing becomes a mess because then other players come out and say, well, we've got third-party payments as well. And then there's the issue of player agents involved in that. And the Isaac Moses name keeps coming up regularly throughout the sport, throughout the NRL, and that is a concern. One single individual has so much power over player contracts, coach contracts, sponsorship deals, and that's a rumbling issue as well. And they're not going away. And it is kind of troubling at a time when the sport has won over the hearts and minds of a lot of Australians and global sports fans, because they managed to reorganise the competition, get it back on the field, get matches played, and get fans into stadiums and work with the Queensland and New South Wales governments and the Capital Territory in Canberra to allow games to be played. Excuse me. Alongside that, there's obviously still games to play this weekend. 2 games left on the ledger. It's going to be interesting to see the other results and how they come in, and who's where on the ladder at the end of the weekend. But I think the top 8 is pretty settled now with Cronulla's win against the Cowboys this morning. I think their position. I think the top 8 is going to be the top 8. It's just what order they're in. On the Parramatta side of things, we'll have to see how they respond to that defeat and how they look at, you know, Brown's injury at halfback and how they reconfigure that back line a little bit. I mean, Jaifield could go in there, but it's open for debate who fills in that position. But it is an interesting one. The Roosters are starting to get players back. The Raiders are, been playing without loads of key players and are continuing to perform. The Storm, I've got a few injuries starting to mount up, and Cameron Smith's future is an ongoing issue there, and that will affect the salary cap for them. And Brandon Smith's obviously got a broken jaw, and there is a bit of issues at hooker at the moment. And Grant, will he, if Smith decides to play on another year, I mean, he has a clause in his contract to go to West Tigers. So there are some ongoing issues with the Storm that will actually have some impacts down the line. Obviously, there's a lot of coach turnover at a lot of clubs, and the Dragons is a team that they have a lot of talent, but they're not utilising it effectively. So it'll be interesting to see how Barrett, when he comes in, what he does with that roster and if there's changes necessary there. But it's all very up in the air at the moment about what's happening. But it's an interesting time. On other sporting things, the NBA boycott that's spread around other sports in the US and Canada. I have my views on politics and sport and how they shouldn't really mix on professional sport. We've seen it in the Olympics and the damage it does to the Olympic movement. We've seen issues with clear corruption involving politics and sport at the Olympics and World Championships and FIFA World Cups. And look at this coming Olympics in Tokyo. Shinzo Abe's government has put a lot of political capital on the line. They've made it a key government domestic policy. Not only have they just had the Rugby World Cup, they obviously want to get this Olympics to go ahead. And this is where sport and politics, there's a delicate balance. And when it comes to professional sport, I think mixing with politics is a dangerous game. And we've seen how divisive that has been in the NFL with Colin Kaepernick and the 4 years of Colin Kaepernick taking any protests that have now spread. And the way the NFL dealt with that initially under Roger Goodell and how they backtracked on their initial decision to punish players and teams who openly protested before or during games. Professional sport should not be a political football. It really shouldn't. And unfortunately, it has become such. And the best way to improve diversity and inclusiveness is from the bottom up. And what we're seeing is a very forced top-down approach, which is really actually creating more problems and division than is, necessary. And with the NBA leading the way, but this is what gets me. All these players in professional sport, as soon as you become a professional athlete, especially in team sports, you're automatically enrolled in the players' union. And, you have the ability to strike. And it's taken them this long to go, we are not happy with something. But normally when strikes and labour disputes take place, it's not to do with who gets what money out of TV agreements, contracts, image rights, revenue sharing. And that becomes a PR nightmare with the sport going public. And the NBA is one of those sports that's actually managed to sort out its labour disputes in recent decades. You look at the NHL, you look at Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA has really solved a lot of its labour disputes in the last 20 or so years. And this is the first time the players have refused to play for political reasons. And could the situation have been avoided? It's a difficult one because of the heightened social unrest in the US right now. It's a difficult one. But during the civil rights movement and during other, anti-Vietnam protests, professional sport didn't stop. It didn't stop. And this is what I find bizarre is you've got all these players' unions. And we've had the same debate over here in Europe about racism in football and homophobia in sport and sexism in sport and corruption in sport. And at no point Have the players gone to their union going, "We've had enough of this. We're going to go on strike"? At no point has that ever entered the narrative. And what gets me is during the height of the coronavirus lockdown here in the UK, the PFA came out and said to the players, "Don't take wage cuts. Don't take wage deferrals. Reject the offers that are on the table from the clubs." Instead of going into negotiations in good faith, trying to come to some kind of solution to, mitigate the issues, the PFA said, "Nah, don't do it," which led to then a PR backlash, not only against the clubs for how they were furloughing non-playing staff, but also you look at it and it harmed the PR reputation and the reputation of the PFA, an organisation where Gordon Taylor, as chief executive, is under increasing pressure to resign. There's been concerns about his role within the organisation, and it's the same with the NHLPA. Not all the players were happy to return to play. I think about 25% were against the idea to resume playing at this time for a variety of reasons, be it health or political reasons. Yet they went ahead with it. So players' unions have a big role to play in a variety of issues, but I think the NBA players, I think it was across the board. I think a lot of teams across the board were like, "We're not happy with what's going on. We're going to make a stand here." It was only a 2-day shutdown. It's, in the big scheme of things, will it be remembered? For a while. They've decided to a compromise and a return to play today. The NHL have decided the same. They're going to return to play today. The Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, they've all these sports stars have obviously been contacting each other. All these teams and team owners have been contacting each other about what's going on. And there have been some concerns from some players about team owners' views on the situation. And that's in public discourse. And normally when we have these like player strikes, normally it's a battle for the PR side of things to get fans on side. It's normally a battle between billionaires and millionaires about who gets what money. And I think this is now more of a social thing, and it is very divisive. And I do think we have to tread a very fine line between sport and politics. And we've discussed it on recent live streams of sport and politics. What I find really amazing is in Australia, because I'm a massive NRL fan, we don't have this debate. They don't have this debate between sport and politics as much. And they already have, the Aboriginal round. They already have the Women in League round. So the NRL is quite far ahead of sports around the Western world in acknowledging ethnic minorities in sport, acknowledging women in sport, acknowledging the social aspects that allow the sport to take place, acknowledging the community in various ways. They have charity rounds, they have armed forces rounds. North American and European sport could learn a lot from the NRL, the AFL, and how they acknowledge the various members of the community of all backgrounds in sport. Are there still issues? Absolutely. Are there still problems? Yeah. But the problems don't seem to be as bad socially as they are in Europe and North America right now. Right. So any other questions on any other stuff? Because I'm going to be just droning on otherwise, and that become quite boring. I mean, I don't know what else really to discuss unless you want to keep asking questions, because this works with your involvement, and this is something that I think the discourse that we see about sport at the moment, there's a lot of division about a lot of things. I mean, I've been asked to comment on the Sky Sports decision to sack Thompson and Letizia from Sky Sports panel. And Sky's decision was based on cost-cutting reasons. But then if they are going to replace them with women and people of colour, and if it's cost-cutting reasons, that surely then means that those people promoted to replace them on Soccer Saturday are getting paid less than what Letizia and Thompson were, which then is a defeat in the object of inclusiveness and diversity. And then you have a whole host of other things. And I think I do feel a bit sorry for Letizia and Tomo, because they haven't done anything wrong. You may find their views annoying, or you may disagree with them, but they haven't done anything wrong. They've been told what to say by their producers and their editors, and discuss what's going on in those matches that they're watching and they're reviewing. I can't see that Sky decision going down very well with their target audience, which ironically is the same age demographic and same social demographic as the blokes on the panel. You're going to see a lot of people switch off. And a lot of mainstream media is playing this PR game. And it's a political game as well. That a lot of the mainstream are getting frustrated with. That these fringe minority groups that have sometimes quite nasty aims have hijacked social issues and a gaslighting situation. And it puts pressure on the sporting organisation or the broadcaster. And I scratch my head. The tick box exercise doesn't work. And I've said this so many times, in order to increase inclusiveness and diversity, it has to start at the bottom, and you have to reach out to your demographics, and you have to reach out and do your research and ask the questions at grassroots level. You have to invest at grassroots level. You have to give opportunity to all at grassroots level in order to break down the barriers that are already there. To force it down from the top downwards is only going to increase division and divisiveness, and in the end it causes more problems than solutions down the line, and we're already seeing that across the social spectrum. What else? But that's something that I've discussed a lot, and I've been asked to discuss a lot, is Sky Sports' decision to sack Le Tissier and Thompson, or remove Thompson and Le Tissier from their role in Soccer Saturday. It doesn't sit well with me that people who've done nothing wrong, who've had no controversy away from their job, who've not made controversial comments, on air, lose their jobs. What my favourite and least favourite football pundits, we've discussed this before, Mike, a lot. I like Jerome, I like Jenas, Jermaine Jenas. I do like Ian Wright. Ian Wright's hilarious. I really like Ian Wright. I think he speaks from a passionate perspective, because football saved him from going down the dark path of crime and drugs and prison. And he has spoken about that at length, about his youth of being a little bit of a bad boy and a bit misguided, and how a school teacher and Crystal Palace eventually got him on the right path, and then he went to Arsenal, and the rest is history. Micah Richards is another one who speaks with great clarity. These are all men of colour. They speak, all of them have great intelligence on the game, and Ian Wright especially speaks with a really great passion about the sport that he loves so much. And, his two sons have played professionally at the top level in various leagues around the world, and he's exceptionally proud of their achievements in the game. And Ian Wright, for me, yes, he has a bias towards Arsenal and to a certain extent Crystal Palace, because they're the clubs he played for, but the passion he has for the sport and what the sport gave him is brilliant. Least favourite, Owen Hargreaves, while he is intelligent when it comes to understanding the game, and as a player he showed a bit of passion, as a pundit he's awful. It's Jake Humphrey as a presenter, awful. I think I do miss Alan Hansen on Match Today, because he was just blunt to the point and he didn't hold any punches. I miss John Motson as a commentator, but obviously he retired for health reasons and his age. He was getting on, and he did have several bouts of cancer, so he retired for health reasons, which is a shame. But he was the voice of the FA Cup final for years. I think, as I'm watching less football now than what I was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I will admit that I am watching less football. I'm enjoying the sport less. I have to admit, some of my favourite pundits are men of colour. And when I say men of colour, I mean Ian Wright, Micah Richards and Jermaine Jenas. They speak with such a passion about their sport and such intelligence about their sport that I really enjoy listening to them. Matt Le Tissier, I think, has been harshly done by Sky. I think he's, one of the best players and most underrated players of his generation when it came to his, playing in midfield. Didn't get capped by England enough, possibly because he just played for Southampton his entire career, which I think is wrong. I think, he's not playing for a fashionable club. He's one of the most skilled midfielders of his era, and many players he played against him or saw him play have said such. The things he could do with a free kick or with the ball at his feet, he wasn't blessed with great pace, and he wasn't blessed with great physicality in the sense that he could, knock players off the ball. He just had, I think, the right mindset and the right brain play the game. If Sky was to get NHL rights, would you pay for it? No. I'm not a massive fan of Sky Sports or BT Sport for that matter. I've seen a few games on Premier Free Sports, mostly on Free Sports, and I'm there has to be a line drawn. If you want to grow an audience, the best way to get an audience enticed in your sport or your league is free to air. It's been proven time and time again. And as soon as a sport becomes popular or a league becomes popular, it ends up going behind a paywall. That is not the way to do it. Look at rugby league. Look at the Super League. Look at the NRL. The reason why I watch a lot of NRL is because I've signed up to the NRL Watch NRL website, and for a fraction of the price, for £12.50 a month, I get to watch every single game and every single associated program to do with the NRL. I don't know how much a Sky Sports subscription is, but on top of that, you've got Sky Box Office for the boxing and the MMA. So you're paying for a subscription on top of a subscription, which I think is the wrong business model, and people are illegally streaming. I mean, when Anthony Joshua had his last couple of fights against Ruiz, and Mayweather had his fight against Conor McGregor, more people illegally streamed it for nothing or for pennies than actually paid for the box office, and that tells you something. And right now, with the financial situation for so many people, I mean, I'm lucky in the job that I have a guaranteed. I mean, I work as a bin man, so my wage isn't great, but I'm lucky that I've worked solidly through the lockdown. I've worked all summer. The last 2 days I've had off, obviously, till yesterday. I just booked some holiday because I'm due it. I've taken hardly any holiday apart from moving. I've worked solidly for 6 months. I've had 9 days off in 6 months, which are contracting days off. There are people who have lost their jobs. The sustainability of Sky and BT and their subscription sports services cannot be sustained at the prices they are asking. You've seen the amount of people switch off in large numbers, especially early on during the lockdown. The subscriptions, people would just go, "Enough, sod this, I've had enough." And you look how much they're charging. I think the basic Sky Sports package is around £30. Then you had Premier Sports, which is not a lot a month. I'm going to say that now. Premier Sports is not a lot. Free Sports is available on Freesat and Freeview, depending on the age of your Freesat or Freeview box, but you can get that. I think 90% of households can get Free Sports, and they've got some good coverage and some good leagues on there. And you can watch the MLS, and you can watch the Portuguese league and the Dutch league. The issue is people are cancelling their BBC subscriptions for the TV license, and that's a concern for the revenues of the BBC. They're facing a backlash for their left-wing bias, and that's the political side affecting the BBC, and they know this. And when you've got politicians coming out and saying scrap the license fee, make it a commercial station, that tells you there's a change in trend. On the side of Sky Sports, the basic sports package, yes, it's around £30 to £35 a month, depending on if you have it on other deals with your internet and Sky's and all that. The ITV have got the horse racing now with Racing TV, which is good. So if you like your horse racing, ITV's got a lot of coverage there, which is pretty good. But this is where I tale of caution. Channel 4 racing. So when Channel 4 had the horse racing rights, John McCririck, the old pundit who sadly passed away recently, yes, he was a controversial figure. He was the most popular presenter on their horse racing broadcasts. And then Channel 4 nicked all the rights from BBC, and they worked in partnership with Racing UK, the pay-per-view, channel on the Sky package. And then Channel 4 came to the decision to get rid of it. Said, no, we're moving on from Mr. McCririck. And Channel 4 sacked him. He took him to a tribunal because he said he was sacked because of his age and his gender. And he was right. He had a female co-presenter alongside him around the betting ring, and they bounced off each other. Yes, his humour was a bit tongue-in-cheek, and of a certain age, you may find that a little bit uncomfortable. But he took to an employment tribunal. He died within a few years. He died several years later. ITV realised Channel 4 were bleeding viewers on their horse racing coverage. They were losing viewers left, right, and centre. They lost the rights. They went to ITV. ITV got a better package, got more race meets, on their calendar. They actually got more horse racing. BBC lost their rights to Channel 4 for the Grand National, and they lost their rights for the Royal Ascot, which was a killer for BBC. They lost the rights to Channel 4. Channel 4 then lost all those rights that they had with the other horse racing meets they had to ITV. ITV have increased their portfolio to show all the big classics. And ITV racing, I don't like the coverage as much as Channel 4, but I understand why it's got more viewers, because they have a bigger package. And guess what? ITV, you don't have to pay for it. Plain and simple. Channel 4 was Horse Racing Central until about 3 years ago. They lost all the rights to ITV, including rights they had acquired from the BBC. So the BBC lost rights to Channel 4 because they had shared rights on the horse racing on a Saturday, for example. You would have someone, let's say the Ascot meet would be on Channel 4, and you might have a racing meet at Kempton Park on BBC. And you might have the race meet at Kempton Park or Haydock on Channel 4. BBC gets Ascot, and you see you'd have several meets at the same time on two channels. All of that's gone to ITV, all of it. Because Channel 4 lost the rights to the Tour de France, ITV again. Channel 4 lost the rights to Italian football. They ended up on Channel 5. So Channel 4 lost a lot of its live sport over the last decade and a half, to other free-to-air terrestrial and pay-per-view broadcasters. Channel 4 is basically bankrupt. They've also gone down this do Americans get a good package for their sports? I'm not so sure. You've got the media, you've got the NHL blackout, the NFL blackout. If you live in a certain area, you get blacked out of games. You can't watch certain games. So if you are a sports journalist, or an amateur YouTuber like me, for example, you have a blackout. So if you pay for these packs, I mean, if you watch, there's a guy called The Hockey Guy. I suggest you watch him, and he mentions the NHL blackout. It's the same with the 3 o'clock kickoff blackout here in the UK. You can't watch it. And for people who can't afford to go to games, because he mentions the cost of a ticket, and you convert that to British pounds or American dollars, Canadian dollars, or whatever currency you're working in. Oh, it's expensive to be an NHL fan. It's very expensive. Hockey is an expensive sport, but it's very expensive. How do I think sport will change post-coronavirus? That's an interesting one. I think high top-end athletes are going to have to take wage. Football players, rugby players are going to have to take significant salary cuts when they come to contract negotiations. I can't see the transfer record for football being broken. We've seen a lot of free transfers in this transfer window. We haven't seen mega deals. I think Leeds have just done a record transfer though for a player from Valencia. But in real terms, I can't see Messi going for anything but a free. I can't see Barcelona invoking that €700 million buyout clause, because I don't think it can be justified, considering the fact if Manchester United, a club of equal global standing when it comes to branding and sales, is losing $5 million a day without fans in attendance. $5 million a day. You just imagine what's happening to a club, let's say, let's think of a medium like Brighton. They are trialing fans in stadiums for some of these pre-season friends, but you think of a club like Brighton's size, or Wolves have got a bit of decent financial backing, but you think of a club of the stadium half the size of Old Trafford. They were losing $5 million a day. It'd be catastrophic. West Ham, they've got quite a sizable stadium that they're renting. Imagine that. It starts to make worrying signs, because we were told at the end of the 2016-2017 season, I believe, that the Premier League clubs in the league at the time, for that season, half of them could let us in for free, and the other half, £10 should be the maximum price of a match day ticket, right? And they could still make the same amount of money comfortably, right? We could go in for free, they could still make massive profits, and they wouldn't take much of a financial hit. That was proven to be a lie. The clubs were not fully opening up their books. What we've seen with football and rugby union to a certain extent is a massive overspend and massive financial mismanagement. And that is, I think, where sport has got to change. I'm a massive motorsport fan. I love my touring cars. I love my NASCAR. I love my rallying. I like my superbikes. The amount of teams that haven't been able to put cars and bikes on the grid this season. British touring cars, they're 10 vehicles. They're 10 cars down on last year. They have a smaller field. They have a smaller support package. There are some teams that are still existing. They just can't afford to put drivers in cars and cars on the grid for a full season. I think the Power Max Racing team came back last weekend with one car. They're normally a two-car team. They had one car, and they put their engineer, he's also a racing driver, in the car because he's going to set up the car when other drivers come in on contracts. So what we're going to have to see is the top end sports star. So your Wayne Rooney's, your Mesut Ozils. So I know Mesut Ozil was the top paid player at Arsenal, for example. They're going to have to take wage cuts. And the reason why I say this is Augustine Pichot, during the World Cup Rugby Union, said, I'm going to run for presidency. I'm interested in running for the presidency of World Rugby. So basically the same position as FIFA chairman, for example, okay? He stated, in order for rugby union to survive and thrive and grow professionally around the world, and this is pre-coronavirus, the top-end talent has to take a pay cut and the wealth has to be better distributed to those professionals and semi-pros to allow the semi-pros to go professional and lower paid professionals to get paid more and to make the game more sustainable. This is pre-coronavirus. Rugby union realised there was issues, and those within the game realised there was issues to do with finance. And rugby union is a global game. And if someone of Augustine Pichot's standing within the game says there is issues financially with the structures in place in the sport, and this is one of the biggest sports in the world for registered players, you can see the issues that football is facing, which is an even bigger sport with even more money floating around that isn't reaching the grassroots and the lower level clubs. Just look at what's happening in League One and League Two, and they said, I think back in April, that they were proposing a salary cap. So what I think is going to have to happen is the TV deals are going to have to change. The structures of them are going to have to change. That's how I think sport will change. Top-end talent has got to be willing to take less money in order for the sports to survive. And the lower professional leagues are going to have a better relationship with the TV deal and the governing bodies, because we have seen before the coronavirus, Bury, for example, going bust. Okay, completely avoidable. Poor governance. Governance has got to change. There's got to be more transparency in finance and governance across the board at all levels, be it amateur, semi-professional, professional. The fact that rugby league in this country, professional sport, had to seek assistance from the government in order to survive at all levels, and the fact that one of the teams in the Super League, the Toronto Wolfpack, has had to pull out of this season, tells you we need to. I think the MLS should keep their salary caps. And the simple fact being, we do not know when fans in the US will be allowed back into stadiums, and salary caps is part of American sport. If they get rid of that, clubs will go bust. Before they had a salary cap system, clubs went out of business. They struggled. I think the MLS has got their cap system just about right. The sport is growing in the US at a sustainable rate now, but the MLS solution is expand every time. Always expansion, always expansion. They have to consolidate, and I think the salary cap is crucial to that. The scary thing is, I think salary caps are going to become the norm. Spending caps, controlled spending, because we know that financial fair play in European football doesn't work. We know that it's a flawed system. If UEFA have come out and said, that doesn't work, but we're going to continue with the system anyway, even though it's flawed, we're going to still punish clubs, but then they're going to appeal. They're going to win their appeal, and then we reduce their punishment. Tells you there's problems. Biggest channel in Canada is Sportsnet. TSN had the rights, lost the rights. Sportsnet's got the rights to the NHL. Sportsnet is backed up by Rogers, which is the biggest media group, but Sportsnet is losing money. Yes, TSN gets the regional coverage of like the Jets and the Flames and the Oilers and the Canucks, and they get regional games. But because Sportsnet is the Toronto media, Rogers, they get the main rights to the NHL. TSN gets regional rights to the NHL. Sportsnet's the bigger company, although a lot of people prefer TSN's coverage because it's better. And I will agree with that. I have watched a Sportsnet feed, and I watched the TSN feed, and I prefer the TSN feed. I think it's better quality. I think the commentators, the pundits, the whole setup is much better done. But that's my opinion. What else do I think will change in sport post coronavirus? Well, firstly, we don't know how long this pandemic's going to last. There are concerns there could be a massive second wave in the winter, which is concerning for me because of the job I do. It's concerning for me because of members of my family having underlying health issues and some of my friends. So that is a concern for me. On the other side of sport, while we're discussing finances, yeah, the TV deals have to change, and the accessibility has to change, and grassroots funding has to be key. because we are going to see whole communities lose sports teams. Not just football, it's across the board. Look at British ice hockey; it's in a mess right now. We're losing rinks, teams have uncertain futures, and the top league, the EIHL, the elite league, is not sure if there's going to be a season. Plain and simple. Rugby league in Europe is in a mess. Both France and the UK, they're not sure if they're going to have, the Wolfpack come back. Next season's very uncertain. They've cancelled the Women's Super League and Challenge Cup. Concerning. The MLS, I think, should keep their salary cap. I think they need to adjust it. I think they need to look at it, because it's a soft cap, flexi cap system, but they need to retain it. Plain and simple. It's the only way the MLS will come out of this, the other side, healthy. If you allow expenditure to go through the roof, it's not sustainable. Just look at European football; it's not sustainable. Do I have any good news for all of us? Well, the NRL's been getting quite interesting, but not everyone's an NRL fan. Penrith have won 11 in a row, 7 at home, so club records, which is nice to see. And their game against the West Tigers was spicy. I'm surprised it didn't end up in a massive punch-up. There were some rather nasty incidents which were a bit spicy. Great game to watch. One of the best first halves of rugby league I've seen. I watched the whole game and I was just glued. I mean, I had to go pick my motorcycle up from workshop. I was glued to the game. I mean, I got the message at like 11:30 saying, your bike's ready for collection. I was like, okay, I'll go at 1 o'clock. So I watched the whole game. And that was the most intense battle in the first half. I think in the end, Penrith just won because I think emotions of the West Tigers boiled over. Brilliant game to watch, though. I would recommend that you get the Watch NRL. Go on the Watch NRL website, sign up for it, pay the 130 quid a year, £12.50 a month, and really give it a watch. Watch every game. For £12.50 a month, I get everything the NRL has to offer. And we're talking about Sky Sports and how much it costs. You don't get to watch every Premier League game. You don't get to watch every rugby union game. You don't get to watch every cricket match because they're only allowed so much. So you don't get to watch everything. And in Australia, there's been criticism of how they dealt with the Cricket World Cup, the Football World Cup, the Rugby World Cup. And Channel 9 stepped in and went, yeah, no, we're going to show a lot of this. Foxtel came in and said, we're going to buy the rights of this fading company. People aren't happy with how much they've been asked to pay. So what we're going to see coming out of the coronavirus, sport's going to change. There are going to be some changes that we don't like. There's going to be some changes that I think fans have been calling for a long time. We could lose teams. We could see. No, I wouldn't say sports will die. The sports will bounce back. The sports will return in some way, shape, or form. But there's going to be massive league restructuring, and there's going to be a change. I think British ice hockey's in a bit of a mess. The sport will survive. Don't get me wrong. The sport will survive. What form the league structure looks like, we'll wait and see. But the sport will survive. The interest there. There's enough kids playing the game. There's enough players who want to keep playing. The sport will survive. In what structure it looks like is the wait and see thing. Rugby union, rugby league, there are concerns clubs will fold. Again, I think the sport's played at school, the sport will survive. Cricket played at school, the sport will survive. I mean, ice hockey's played at university, so the sports will survive. It's the structure of them that I think is the changes that we're going to see. I think leagues may be affected, and league structures. Look at League One and League Two in football. They're the ones that are going to be affected. Player salaries at the top are going to be affected. If the players in football, rugby union, rugby league, whatever professional sport around the world, not just in the UK, continue to demand, the EIHL, we just don't know what's going to happen with that. I haven't actually, because it's summer, I've obviously only been following the Bracknell situation, but I haven't really been following any ice hockey news. I haven't really actually watched any of the playoffs. I've seen little snippets online and everything, but since the Jets and the Coyotes are out, I haven't got any interest in the playoffs now, because the two teams that I want to do very well are both out of the playoffs, so therefore my interest is abated somewhat. I want to see the Golden Knights, see if they can get back to the Stanley Cup final and try and resurrect the wrongs of last year and the year before, and see if they can win the trophy. But but the thing is, rugby union in South Africa is played in school and university. The sport will survive and recover. It's just the league. I mean, the Cheetahs and the Southern Kings aren't going to be taking part in the rest of the Pro 14 season because rugby union in South Africa cannot take place. Now, I'm surprised. South Africa's a Commonwealth nation. I am surprised, and it's not actually on the list of countries you have to quarantine from when you come home. I'm surprised that the two South African teams haven't come to Europe, gone into a bubble. Doesn't matter if it's Italy or Scotland or Wales or Ireland, and try to play on away from home. That is surprising to me. But there are concerns about sports Africa taking a massive hit. Football, cricket, and rugby union, the three major sports. Massive concern. I mean, cycling is actually quite popular. Tennis is quite popular because there's been individual athletes, swimming, who've had success, and that grows sport. But no, rugby union is a religion. Cricket's a religion, and for the majority of Black South Africans and some whites, football is a religion as well. So the three biggest sports in South Africa can't take place right now, and that is a massive impact on sport, which is a unifier in South Africa, a very divided country. But that's very uncertain if the current structure of the Super Rugby and Pro 14 teams, whether they'll be able to resume next season as well, and what Super Rugby is going to look like. Super Rugby's been massively affected, so we'll have to see what happens. The EIHL, again, they're not certain about season this year, and that is concerning. But the sports will survive. The league structures will change. That's a possibility. The fact that British ice hockey, all the teams at the various levels have received grants. They have been given money. I forget what the top tier got, but I know that the NIHL top tier, they were given a grant of about £330,000 each to cover each season, the season budget for all the teams from UK sport. So they were given tax-free grants and financial assistance. The RFL obviously received financial assistance from the government. The concerning thing is grassroots level sport. Those amateur clubs, those semi-pro clubs that operate on very fine margins, that is a concern. If the grassroots, we've had this chat about the financial structures in football, for example, and how the lower leagues, a lot of clubs are losing money. When the Huddersfield chairman came out and said, anywhere from 10 to 60 clubs, more likely the top end will have some form of financial difficulty or distress in the next season, he wasn't lying. The fact that Macclesfield, Wigan, Bolton, Bury went out of business, obviously. 4 clubs were involved at some point with administration and points deductions and financial difficulty this season. 3 of them had those issues going into the season and before the lockdown, and then one of them post-lockdown were hit with a punishment as well. It tells you all was not well going into the pandemic. Coming out of it, you look at the knock-on effect. And the fact that the TV deal is so skewed the wrong way is concerning. So you're asking if would it kill any leagues? I think leagues will restructure, and the question over governance and structuring and finance and TV deals will be there. The sports will survive because a lot of them are played at school or university. They are played at youth level or amateur level. They will survive and bounce back in some way. But these are sports that survived 2 world wars, Spanish flu pandemic, the Hong Kong flu pandemic. They've survived political issues. They've survived, funding collapses. These sports will continue. The concern is, on the professional side, leagues will have to restructure. Teams may go bust. The sports themselves will carry on. It's the teams that play those sports and it's the leagues they play in will change. But we'll see what happens coming out of the pandemic. We'll see what happens when the World Health Organization says the pandemic's over, we can return to normality. There's a vaccine. We're looking like there could be vaccine and closer than we think, according to reports. But the scary thing is, obviously, right now, the concern is obviously the financial impact. And what has obviously come out is, across the globe, financial mismanagement in professional sport is there. Poor governance has been highlighted in a variety of leagues and sports. Oh, bad planning, bad ownership, weak governance, lack of transparency, and the role of player agents and sports agents has been highlighted over recent years and going into the pandemic about their involvement and their influence on teams and players and coaches and chief executives. So one thing that I can see coming out of sport, which could be good, is massive reform of governance. Massive reform of governance, more transparency. A lot of things fans have been calling for, I think, will be enacted. I mean, yes, it is unfortunate that some of our favourite sports we can't go and watch. They're currently suspended. They're not playing. We can't go for a kickabout down the park, although people do it anyway. We can't, play a bit of frisbee down the park. We can't, bit of touch rugby, bit of cricket. You can play golf because you can isolate playing golf. You can play tennis because you can isolate playing tennis. But the contact team sports, yeah, we can't, participate, and it's a shame. But I think the big changes, positive changes we'll see is a reform of sports governance and hopefully a more balanced TV rights package where there's more free to air and internet streaming coverage that is more accessible, especially for those on lower incomes, because I can't see the sustainability of Sky and BT with the price of what they're asking on a monthly subscription or a yearly subscription. I cannot see that being sustainable. I mean, I always hark back to my NRL subscription, 130 quid a year. It's gone up by £10 a year because inflation. That is acceptable. Last year it was 120 quid. So that's 12. That's £12 a month, right? So for 130 quid a year, I get every single match, every single related program related to the NRL for £12.50 a month. 130 quid a year. How much do people pay for Sky and BT and Premier and ESPN and Eurosport? You add up all the sports subscription TV companies out there. You add them all up. How much does that actually cost? Just for one of those subscriptions. Then you add up all of them and you work out how expensive and how lucrative the TV market is for professional sport. They've milked it for so long. And this is part of the problem. It's not sustainable for the average sports fan. Because if it was working as well as it should do, and the money was evenly distributed, our ticket prices would not be as expensive as they are for the top level. And part of the problem with that is the players' wages have skyrocketed, and the player transfer fees and contracts have skyrocketed, and the price for replica shirts. What I find absolutely disgusting is how much they are charging with taxes. Depends what country you go to, but with sales taxes, how much they charge for sports replica shirts, sports jerseys, the merchandise, how much they actually charge, and that's a massive markup considering how cheaply these things are made, how much they're charging. I mean, my NHL jerseys and my hockey jerseys, I mean, I've never paid full price ever for a jersey, ever. But I look online, I want to get a few new ones. I'm looking online at Vegas and Arizona and Winnipeg. I'm looking like 160 to 240 pounds. And I'm thinking, what? I know they've got to come from North America and there's a sales tax and importation tax, and I'll take that into account. But then I look at some of the Premier League jerseys, like Man United's last season, 140 quid for last season's jersey. I'm like, what? They don't even do the long sleeve version anymore. £140 to have Chevrolet on my chest if I was a Man United. 140 quid. And I'm thinking to myself, my Blackburn jersey from the 2006-2007 season cost my dad, because it was an adult small, I stress that, so it was an adult size, cost my dad, what was it, £55, 60 quid from the club shop? And he went all the way to Blackburn to buy it. He didn't order it online. He actually he went on the train all the way up. So the jersey cost half as much then as Man United's last season. 140 quid. £140. Ridiculous. And you imagine 20% of that is VAT. Even then, it's still over 100 quid It's ridiculous. It's £28 VAT, and you take it off, it's still over £100. And I'm thinking, well, that's ridiculous. And we were told that the TV rights deal back in 1992 would benefit fans. Keep ticket prices and merchandise sales low because they're making money off the TV. That is a complete and utter lie that we were sold, and hence why I will never pay for Sky LBT. Because clearly we're not receiving the benefit of that. And then when the TV companies come out and say, oh, because you've had to shut down like every other industry apart from the key industries, so hospitals, police, bin men, haulage firms, we're going to ask for our money back. We're going to throw our toys out the pram because we've got nothing to show on the telly. We're going to ask for loads of money back because this is not what we pay for. You breached contract. Well, the government told these people you can't play safely. Health of the nation comes first. That's what I find the amount of money they've made out of people on low wages is disgusting. On the Newcastle takeover, look, there's nothing new. You ask the same question daily. It gets dull. There is nothing new. The deal has collapsed. Is Peter Kenyon going to come in? Is Amanda Staveley going to come back for a 4th or 10th? We know there's deals on the table in the pipeline. Questions have to be asked of the Premier League and the FA over dragging out the process. Steve Bruce, as I say, faces the same problems as Benitez with job uncertainty, transfer funds, be able to build a competitive squad, a whole variety of things. Mike Ashley is going to be compelled to sell because of his retail businesses having a massive financial impact because of the lockdown. So Mike Ashley has to sell this club regardless. But questions have to be asked of the FA and the Premier League. That's basically what I've been stressing since the deal collapsed. Questions have to be asked of the FA and the Premier League about why they refused to, firstly, they dragged it out for so long, and secondly, why they decided to block the deal. Plain and simple. It's not the first time Saudi money has been involved in English football. Look at Sheffield United. And it's not the first time that overseas money has been involved in English football. Look at a variety of clubs that are owned by foreign owners. So questions have to be asked over the hypocrisy. Questions have to be asked of the transparency of the process. And whether you like or hate Steve Bruce, questions have to be asked about his future. The uncertainty, how we've had that with Benitez, the uncertainty, the lack of fan involvement in whatever takeover deal. Will fans be represented on the board? Will fans have a say in how their clubs run? I think that is more questions that have to be asked, not only about Newcastle, but about all English football. The lack of fan involvement in day-to-day running of clubs is a massive, massive concern that doesn't go away. Massive concern. And it hasn't gone away. The only team that I know of that has mass fan involvement in the running day-to-day of the club is Exeter City. And that is a club that is always highlighted as a model of good governance. Every year. Model of good governance, Exeter City. Yes, they're in a lower league. Yes, they aren't awash with cash. But Exeter City is a model of good governance when it comes to club ownership and how much of a say fans have in the day-to-day running of their club. They've managed to get a new stadium. They're rebuilding St James's Park down next to City. That is a well-run club with the community at its heart, fans at its heart, and they do have a say in how the club's run. They do have a say where the money goes. They do have a say on ticket prices and season ticket deals. And they have a big say in how that club's run down there, and it works very well. And I think more clubs could learn from Exeter City and have more fan involvement because it's to me, the fans I believe own a massive stake. I forget who the chairman is. There is a private investment as well. There is a private owner, but I do know that there is mass fan involvement in the running of Exeter City. Fans are on the board. They have a stake in the club. It's very similar to the German model. I think that's the German model. Exeter City have looked at that, and that actually works quite well. They've got no debt. It's a well-run club. They've managed to fund their stadium rebuild through fan involvement. A friend of mine lives a stone's throw from St James's Park in Exeter City, where Exeter City play. The other St James's Park, obviously, in the heart of it. It's not too far from the city centre. It's a 10-minute walk from Exeter St David's train station. It's on a main road. I mean, the link. My mate Paul lives for a 10-minute walk from the stadium. You can hear it on a match day, on a busy match day, on a packed-out stadium. Let's say Exeter are playing Yeovil, for example, hypothetically, one of those local derbies down there, or Plymouth. You can hear the stadium from his house. And you can see the stadium from the park behind his house. There's a hill. It's in a bit of a dip. There's a hill, and you can see it. It's not a massive stadium, but you can see it, and it's right at the heart of the community. It's not like the Badesky in Reading, which is right on the edge of town. It is still at the heart of Exeter, the city itself. It's on the edge of the city centre. It's a beautiful little stadium in a beautiful little city, and the fans have mass involvement. I think that is the model going forward. I think other clubs in England and Scotland and Wales can learn a lot with the fan involvement in the day-to-day running of their clubs, and they should be allowed. There should be fan representation on the board. I think. Yes, Truro City FC, they share a stadium. So it makes logical sense for both clubs to work in harmony and both codes. I mean, I think the same can be said of rugby league. I think rugby league needs to take a leaf from that book, because Truro FC play in the non-league and the Cornish Pirates play in the second tier of English rugby union. They don't have a lot of money, but they are the biggest sports teams in Cornwall. They attract fans from all over the county, not just the local area of Truro, but all over the county of Cornwall and parts of Devon. So they are a key, integral part of the community in which they're based. They're the two biggest sports teams in for 40, 50 miles, up until you get to Plymouth and Exeter. They are the sporting hub and heart of that region. And they have to share facilities. So it makes logical sense for them to work in partnership. And the fact that Cornish Pirates have said actually will help with your ownership and help with your finances says a lot about how they are run. But the thing is, then you have to look at who runs the Cornish Pirates and go from there. But I think rugby union, rugby league could have, Wigan, the football club, and the rugby club share the DW. Harlequins had a partnership with London Broncos, but the London Broncos call themselves, Broncos Rugby League, Harlequins Rugby League. I think the interesting thing is Wigan Warriors and Wigan Athletic were both owned by Dave Whelan at one point. But yeah, I mean, Harlequins tried it with London Broncos for a couple of seasons. It was a reasonable success story. I think it's a blueprint for both league and union going forward. If both sports are to grow in the different regions, I think league needs to grow in the south of England. Rugby union is working better in the north of England than league is in the south of England. And that's what's, I think, harming rugby league's growth and exposure is the lack of teams south of the Midlands and south of the M62. I think having dual code clubs where they can pool resources and pool finances, because rugby union's played in the winter, rugby league's played in the summer, could work very, very well. You have an all-round kind of fan base then, all year round, where the whole community buys in. I think that could work quite well, but the powers that be in the RFU and RFL constantly slag each other off and constantly, I think, are at loggerheads with each other, and that causes long-term. I mean, the Coventry City Ricoh Arena situation has been going on since day one. They should have never left Highfield Road without having a proper plan. Yes, the Ricoh was built, but they were always leasing it. They've never actually, since they left Highfield, owned their stadium, which has led to constant worry and issue for the club going forward. And this is a shame for a club as historical as Coventry City, a former Premier League club, to be in this kind of situation. But they're not alone. There are so many clubs that have issues where they're renting their stadiums where they play. They don't own them anymore. A lot of them decided to sell when times were good, sell the land to someone else, and then in the lease agreement continue to be the tenants, which for whatever economic reason made sense at the time in the 90s and the 2000s, but and into the 2010s. But then after the financial crisis, it started to make less logical sense. Because to have assets was actually kind of crucial. When you actually don't own where you live, you always have that threat of the owner of the stadium going, we're going to demolish it. So this is the threat. This is the issue that West Ham are going to face. Chelsea had similar issues with Stamford Bridge. These are big clubs, that don't own their stadiums or have full ownership of their stadiums. I mean, Tottenham's a different case. Arsenal's a different case because they decided we're going to buy this land and we're going to build a new stadium. Yes, Coventry City. I mean, this is one of the reasons why Wimbledon, MK Dons split. Plough Lane. There are plans by AFC Wimbledon to rebuild Plough Lane, build a club on land near the old stadium, which I have seen, by the way, which is near IKEA. I've been to the old Plough Lane since it's been abandoned. It's still standing. It's still there. It's just all overgrown, and that's a shame because no one wants to do anything with the land. But we see this in so many sports. Look at British Ice Hockey. Look at the Elite League. The amount of teams whose owners don't own the rink, they have to rent the space. And when the rink owner doesn't want to keep look at Basingstoke, how that rink's falling down. I mean, look at the Bracknell B situation where they've had to move to Slough. the facilities aren't owned by the teams. This is the problem. They're having to lease space and ice time, and then the catastrophic aftermath is such. The Bracknell Hockey Club had multiple senior teams. Now they have one because the operators of their arena were profiteering capitalists, and I've made that very clear. I'm not a big fan of the John Knight Group. I think they're scum. I think they're massive scum. Their flagship venue, they ran into the ground, and it was only in the last 3 years they started actually doing the improvements necessary to bring it back up to grade, and only because patrons and fans of the hockey club were like, "No, you've got to do this. You've got to make changes." And now they're trying to prosecute people for breaking into it. Well, here's the thing: the John Knight Group are very famous for letting buildings that they own run into rack and ruin, so they can then sell it on to developers to make a fair profit. But for many years, they will leave these buildings abandoned, and then they'll prosecute people for breaking into unsafe buildings, which they should be keeping. The upkeep should be a primary concern. As my friend found out, just down the road from where I live, and then they sell the land on to real estate developers for commercial residential property for mega bucks because they hold on to the land, which I think is the worst type of capitalism. I think it's scum. They had 15 years to invest in that building. They chose not to. The Ricoh situation with Coventry, rant aside, is a mess from day one. The fact that now Wasps control the stadium, a lot of fans weren't happy with Wasps moving out of London. A lot of fans weren't. Because it harmed Coventry Rugby Club, ironically. A well-established club in the city. A lot of rugby union fans weren't happy with that move, but it was made. They now own the stadium, and now there's a battle over Wasps' ownership and Coventry City's ownership about leasing the stadium. London Irish and Reading made the Medeski work, right? Wasps actually, Saracens, I think, was it Saracens played at Vicarage Road before it was redeveloped? Yeah, Saracens played at Vicarage Road. Now they've got their own Allianz Arena, but they've obviously breached the salary cap. So fuck Saracens. Harlequins always owned the Stoop, always, which was good. London Welsh, before they obviously went tits up, obviously were playing at the Kassam. They're rugby union clubs, a lot of them don't own the stadiums that they play, and they have to find rugby league or football teams and go, "Can we borrow your ground, please? Or try not to destroy your lovely turf, please." And a lot of football clubs aren't overly keen on ground sharing with rugby union or even rugby league clubs, because obviously rugby league and rugby union are far more damaging to the turf. Just look at some of the rugby league and rugby union stadiums in after bad weather. They become mud baths, and if you've got to share that with the football club, the football players are obviously prima donnas and don't like playing, get dirty. They like their smooth passing surface, and football clubs aren't overly keen these days on ground sharing with either kind of rugby. No, I'm not happy with that. But the Bristol Bears owner, bear in mind his team were relegated out the Premiership a while back because they were crap, is now one of the key proponents of making sure they can't get relegated. Notice that, isn't it? Yeah, very. But he's not asking for the football side of things to be ring fenced, because he also owns Bristol City. The guy who owns the Bristol Bears, he's rebranded them, and people don't even like that either, owns Bristol City, and he's not asking for ring fencing of any football league because he wants to get into the Premier League. But you wait until Bristol City, if they do ever get promotion to the Premier League, you wait for him to have those same arguments, because he knows his spending is not sustainable, and rugby union has a salary cap, and I kid you not, Bristol are in breach of that. If Saracens have been in breach of the salary cap for years, don't be surprised if Bristol fall afoul. And guess who's asking to ring fence the Premiership? The Bristol Bears owner. I'm not so keen on it when an owner who's clearly breaching salary rules that all the clubs sign up to, his club get relegated. Now, what they've done with Ashton Gate is brilliant. I'm not going to deny that. But he wants to get not only Bristol, but he wants to get both Bristol City and Bristol Bears into their respective top flight divisions. And he's a guy who's calling for ring fencing of these top flight divisions. Right? No word of a lie, I'm not comfortable with that. When an individual owner is coming out publicly and saying, "No, I want to ring fence it," partly because he's scared If the amount of money he's overinvested, if he's overspending, clearly, and we know they're breaching the salary cap. It's clear. Look at the team they've assembled. It's clear that Bristol are well over the cap. When an individual owner comes out and says publicly, I want this ring fenced, that makes me feel uneasy. What the RFU needs to look at is there's a reason why promotion relegation has existed for so long, and there's a reason why the clubs are happy to sign up to that principle. Because the lower levels aren't happy with the ring fencing because there's some big clubs down there. The Cornish Pirates, I think, if they were to make the Premiership, would massively grow the game in the West Country. In an area of the country that is underdeveloped economically, it's heavily reliant on just tourism. It needs investment. And if you get a club from Cornwall, which is actually the most economically poor area of the UK, the average salary in Cornwall is the lowest. Like the Cornish Pirates were to get into the top tier, the investment that would come into Truro and Penzance and Falmouth would be unbelievable. It'd be more than just tourism. There'd be a lot of businesses wanting to, we want to advertise with this, right? Sport can have that economic impact of a positive impact. To deny them, and Saracens obviously have to battle their way back, and they're a big brand, right? To ring fence it, that doesn't sit comfortably with me. And yes, Saracens were naughty boys and deserved relegated, but London Irish have been down. Newcastle are down there, right? Right? You think about it, there's some big clubs that have been. Harlequins have been down in the Championship. Right? Not a single one of those clubs has said we've got to ring fence this. Just the Bristol owner has been very, very public. Now, I know other members of the RFU have voiced we can look at this and make the game more sustainable where you ring fence it for a couple of seasons. Right? Ealing have always had a big following. Esher is another one, but Richmond. There are several clubs around the southwest of London that have established structures in place and at times have been in the top flight when it was the amateur and semi-pro era. That I think would be very unhappy not being allowed that opportunity to enter the top flight. And if you want to grow the game in the north, Newcastle, right? Sale, Leeds, Yorkshire Carnegie, for example. All these teams at various points have been in the second tier after being relegated from the top tier. Not a single one of them is saying ring fence. They want to be allowed the opportunity to get back to the top. The problem is some clubs at the top, like Saracens, were clearly breaching. I mean, Exeter. If you ring fence it, you don't get Exeter. There you go. If you ring fenced it, like this guy, the Bristol Bears owner, is suggesting, 2 seasons ago, if it was ring fenced, he doesn't get his club back up. Yeah, he's demanding it now. That makes no sense because you battled to get in there, so now shut it off to everyone else. Nah. I don't see it easy with that. It's called hypocrisy. That's not how you make good policy. The RFU needs to look at rugby finance and supporting the lower levels and looking at the salary cap and looking at how much the top end talent is paid. Absolutely. And the TV deal. They need to have a better TV deal for the lower levels to increase exposure. They need to have a look at the rugby cup competitions to increase exposure. The fact that they have allowed CVC, an investment capital partnership thing, so investment capitalists who want to put money in to get a quick buck out, is concerning. Right? The NRL said no to them, flat out, because Queensland and New South Wales Rugby League, they could get a massive injection of cash. But they realised that cash would not go to grassroots, which is part of their remit, and they said, go away. CVC, watch that. They want to buy the Six Nations, they want to invest in a variety of sports, and sports have been gullible. This money is not reaching the grassroots, not in the slightest. And they have a stake in Premiership Rugby, and they want to buy a bigger stake in Six Nations. And fans are like, you keep your hands off, because this is free to wear. And CVC want to make as much money as possible on their investment. And I don't think the average, same with Rugby League, I don't think the average fan has the money to keep paying for Sky and BT. And the TV rights deal is shockingly bad and hasn't benefited the game clearly. Same with football. We were told that when these TV rights deals were signed and when rugby union went professional, that the average fan, because there's this stereotype that rugby union is for middle class and upper class people, and rugby league is for the lower middle class and the working class people. What am I then? I'm a well-educated bloke, but I work in a working class kind of job. But I'm a well-educated bloke who's gone to boarding school. Massive rugby league fan. I prefer league at club level than union. I prefer union at international level over league because of how the sports are structured. I'm told by the media that only Northerners like rugby league. That's Liverpool. And I'm told that I've got to be middle class, right, a lawyer, a professional to enjoy rugby union, which is balls. Utter balls. There are stereotypes that the media have portrayed in the battle between league and union. Right? We're told that every football fan's a yob. There's a minority, yes. Right? We're told that every football player is thick. Have you heard Micah Richards speak? Have you heard Jermaine Jenas speak? Have you seen the research Alan Shearer has done into head injuries? Are they thick? No. They're actually quite intelligent. Matt Letizia, one of the most intelligent. Graham Lasso. He's now a very, very well respected broadcaster and writer. We're told cricketers are all tops. Freddie Flintoff. If Freddie Flintoff is upper class, I'm a crackhead. The media stereotypes portrayed by about what you can and can't support as a sports star. And the battle between league and union, that's the old boys club, the crusts. They are the problem with the growth of both sports and working together and improving facilities, TV deals, accessibility, growth, finance, whatever it is. And this is what pisses me off. And it concerns me. Sport should bring us together, but unfortunately, the media like to portray us and divide us. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the mainstream. I'm not a fan of Sky. I'm not a fan of BT. And BBC, I think, have become a bit of a damp squib when it comes to battling for what they class as Tier A, which has to be on free to air. They've lost so many rights. They've lost the F1. They've lost horse racing. They've lost the golf. They've lost a lot of the snooker to ITV, thankfully, which is still on free to air. They've lost the superbikes. They've lost MotoGP. Rally Championship. God, I could go on. British ice hockey at one point, when the Super League was in existence, BBC. They've lost so many sports that we compete in, be it national or international. So many. Yet they keep giving us the sport that is being forced on us for forced diversity, which has to come from grassroots. You have to actually ask sports fans what they actually want to watch. You have to go out and research these things, and clearly they're going, oh yeah, well, there seems to be, because the mainstream media goes, there seems to be a drive for gender equality. Let's just put a woman presenter on. Claire Balding is one of the best broadcasters. I got asked this question: best broadcasters of sport out there. She's an ex-equestrian athlete, eventer. Her brother's a horse race trainer, and she's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. She does the Olympics. She does all the gigs. She's basically right. We've got a sport event. It's a big one. Let's wheel Claire Balding out, and her sports knowledge is undeniable. You could not find a more intelligent person about sport than Claire Balding. Sue Barker at a push. Right? No one has complained about Claire Balding or Sue Barker being on the TV because they're competent at what they do. But we're told there's not enough diversity. They're two of the highest paid broadcasters at the BBC, but we are told, right, that we're constantly told this narrative that we need more women, we need more diversity, we need this, we need more. How many football pundits are of ethnic diversity, right? You've got Jason Mohammed, he's of mixed race, right? Jason Mohammed, he's Welsh, half, oh God, where's his dad from? He's of a mixed background, right? Brilliant rugby union presenter, right? There is no debating that. You've got Gabby Logan, ex-gymnast, so she's your next female athlete, right? Yes, she's married to Kenny Logan, ex-rugby player, but she's Welsh as well, ironically. Can't fault her. You've got Claire Balding, you've got Jermaine Jenas and Micah Richards, Ian Wright. Ian Wright is possibly the best football pundit because he speaks with passion from the heart. And I get asked this, he says, if it wasn't for football, I've gone to prison. I was going down a dark path, and then Palace came along, and the rest is history, right? And he also quotes some of his school teachers as well as guiding him, the right direction. He may not be the most intelligent when it comes to his elocution, but my God, he speaks with passion and he speaks with intelligence when it actually comes to the subject of football. No one's complaining that he's black and he's a bit of a he's one of the best, right? You've got the diversity is there. We're just told not to see it. I wouldn't say all female commentators. There are some who are exceptionally intelligent with what they're commentating about. But when it's forced upon you because of their gender rather than their quality, and this is what I've had this. We've had this debate before about do I rate? I've just praised Claire Balding and Sue Barker and Gabby Logan, who I've been watching for 25 years. Let's not kid ourselves. Well, I've been watching Claire Balding and Sue Barker on the TV for 25 years, presenting tennis, the eventing, football, question of sport. You know, Claire Balding when she was on Grandstand, Sue Barker used to cover Grandstand when it was on. Do you remember Grandstand? You know, Des Lynam, the guy with the tash, Frank Boff back in the day before his prostitute scandal. Yeah, that Facebook. I've been watching Claire Balding and Sue Barker and Gabby Logan for the best part of 20 to 30, 25 years. No one was complaining back in the day. We are told that we are forced to have this diversity, and it pisses me off because it's already there. They are already there, but we are told that we need more of it. It's like, well, the cream rises to the top, right? The cream rises to the top. It's there. Christ, the fact that like Ashley Cole, okay, he's an intelligent football player, but off the field he's an arsehole. Let's not deny that. He's not a top quality human being. As a football player, he's brilliant. As an actual analyst, he does actually talk a lot of sense. Unfortunately, he's only there because of the colour of his skin. His off-field record is shocking, absolutely shocking. He shouldn't be anywhere near a studio. But then you look at Sky and how they got rid of Letizia and Tomo, but they kept Carragher and Neville. And I'm really scratching my head. I mean, Neville, he does bring too much of his politics into it, but what he did for the NHS and other key workers during the lockdown, opening up his hotel chain, fine. Carragher, however, spat as a child, kept his job. I am so Paul. How does Merson still have a job with Sky? The amount of scandal he brings on a yearly basis, and how he can't even pronounce players' names, and he's generally drunk, or high as a kite, or still got a gambling problem. They're clearly not helping him with his issues, and they keep, putting him out there when he's clearly not fit to present. Chris Kamara, he's been on our TV screens now for donkeys. And actually, he is quite intelligent. He has his moments where he, forgets who's got sent off in the game he's going to be watching. But jokes aside, Chris Kamara, he's black. He's been on our TV screens for years. He's been a football manager. To say that this diversity doesn't exist is a lie. It's a lie. This is what frustrates me: is the media is perpetuating the narrative that there's no diversity at all. It's there in front of our eyes. Could it be better? Yes. You start at the grassroots. You give opportunities at the grassroots to people of colour, people of different gender orientation. You start at the grassroots. You allow them the opportunities by opening up your doors by going, right, on your application form, are you capable of doing this job? Can you speak English? If you tick those two boxes, you're in. On the application form now, it says, are you male, female, or other? Are you black, white, purple, pink, an alien? And I'm thinking to myself, this is a tick box exercise. People have been rejected on job applications because they're white, male, and over the age of 35. Not diverse enough, apparently. I thought to get a job, you had to be competent at what you're doing, regardless of gender, race, sexuality, or age. But you look at the application form for a job, and it's like, wow, this is really social science in the wrong way. This is political correctness gone mad. That does nothing for diversity. It becomes a tick box exercise. If you have too many white people applying for a job, but you've got to have a percentage of black people applying for a job because of positive discrimination, it does nothing to end discrimination. If anything, it creates more of it because it angers 95% of the applicants going, well, I'm qualified for this. I've done all my badges. I've done all my qualifications. I've worked my way up the slippery pole, and I've been rejected for what? I'm not capable for the job. Don't have enough experience. What? Oh, you've rejected me on my gender, colour of my skin, and my age. Okay. And that's how you get employment tribunals. But in the culture we live in right now, you can't say things like that because diversity. I thought Oh, look, before I get on to politics, the Kick It Out campaign, which is backed by the FA, right, and the Rainbow Laces campaign, which is backed by every sporting governing body I can think of, right, they've both been going, one to tackle homophobia and one to tackle, oh, who's this? Who is phoning me now? Oh, go away. Oh, I'll phone you back in a minute. So, while my phone keeps going on, the Kick It Out campaign has been going for 25 plus years, I think. The Rainbow Laces movement was a movement that started, I forget what sport it started in, but it's evolved. I think social media had anything to do with it. They've been going for a long time, right? If they were successful in what they were doing, we would have openly gay athletes in every sport. Every sport. If the Kick It Out campaign had been successful, why are we seeing a spike in racist incidents at football? Other sports don't seem to have this problem. There's the odd idiot in the grandstand or in the arena, but for the most part, football seems to have the problem, the main issue. The main issue. Rugby league has an issue with some idiots. Not gonna lie, there is issues with crowd disturbances and a few not so keen on that. Rugby union, anyone found of abusing, they're banned for life. They're thrown out the stadium. It's not accepted. You don't get punch ups. You've had the odd little flare up, and the media perpetuates this. Oh, look, we've had open. I mean, Gareth Thomas, dual card international, came out as gay. Not a single one of his teammates or opponents abused him. One of the toughest sports known to men, both codes, league and union. Everyone rallied around him. There's been a few others who've come out as well. I think rugby is ahead in that regard. Both codes in that regard. Still has a long way to go, but it is much further ahead than football. What I find interesting is on the women's side of the sports, far more openly bisexual and lesbian players. There's loads. England captains, Australian captains, field hockey. England captain and vice captain of the women's Great Britain hockey field hockey team at the Olympics. Married. Nigel Owens is the best referee, I think, for a very long time in the top level of rugby union. I could put him on the same level as Collina, Pierluigi Collina, the Italian football referee, in the level of respect players have for him. But this is the thing: if the Kick It Out and the Rainbow Laces campaigns had been effective, why is it then that we don't have more openly gay players? Why is it that Thomas Hitzelsberger, as a top flight professional, came out 2 years after he retired? And he's a well respected, and look, you've got an openly gay guy as a football pundit, and he's very good. He's exceptionally intelligent. His English was pretty good before he came over from Germany. He's an exceptionally intelligent ex-player. He's openly gay, but you wouldn't realise. I don't see what the problem is. I think football has an issue, and it's not tackling it. I wouldn't say female sports need to go, but not alienate. They're not. They're not. I don't see them as doing that. I've got plenty of straight female friends who play football and rugby. I've also got plenty of lesbian mates who play rugby and football as well. They're not alienating teenage girls or young women from playing those sports. What's alienating them is they're not encouraged to play these sports at grassroots amateur level. And there's an issue at school when PE stops becoming compulsory and it becomes a GCSE at the age of 14. Girls stop going to gym class, they don't take up PE in the levels that boys do, and they do more home economics or they do the sciences and maths, yes. The issue is in school when compulsory sports education ends at 14, because it does, because it becomes a GCSE, PE, the amount of girls who drop off, it's seen more as the lads. And that's the issue there. I think that's the problem, is a lot of girls, for social reasons, be it their ethnic or religious background, or for whatever reason, the schools are more geared up to having the lads play the sport than the girls. And I thought it was the way around. I thought girls were called lesbians if they played sport, but the issue is at youth facilities, And this is grassroots. This is where you create the diversity. It's not from the top down, it's from the bottom up. And this is where I think sports governance is getting it wrong. They're trying to drive this diversity drive from the top. But really, it needs to come from education and grassroots clubs, giving the opportunities. All of my friends who've played, I mean, some of my friends were playing for the Queen Bees, and some of them have represented our country in ice hockey. I've got friends who play for the local Bratton Rugby Club and Crowtham Rugby Club, and are, doing quite well with the women's game. I think one or two of their teammates have actually been called up by England at some point, or ex-teammates. Women's football, unfortunately, that seems to be a grassroots level. What I've seen locally, at least, the interest has dropped off for whatever reason. The thing is, would you want to take on a female rugby player? Because some of them are quite well built, and I wouldn't want to take on a female rugby player. And I'm an ex-rugby player, and I'm thinking, ow, she's going to hurt me. Yes, a few of my friends who play for Bratton Rugby Club, yeah, they are openly lesbian. They're proud of it. They don't care. I've known these people for years. It doesn't bother me. They're good at what they do, and I support them in doing what they do. I follow the Bratton Rugby Club women's page. I've played on the same pitches, and I've trained them using the same facilities they have. I have every respect for them. The issue is girls' sport at school, unless they have an interest in netball or rounders, a lot of girls drop out of the sports classes because they're not necessarily compulsory, unless you go to a sports-based sixth form or sports-based school where the sport is actually encouraged as a compulsory GCSE, and they're few and far between. Unless you go to a school that's actually geared towards a good sports program, be it private or state, that's the problem. And in the Bracknell area, only one of the schools actually has a decent sports program long term. It has a UK trampoline centre where the Olympic trampoline team do some training. It's got links to the local sports centre, which has got shared playing fields where they play some of their games, football and field hockey and cricket. So, yes, you do have certain schools that do have sport on the curriculum. The problem is encouraging them to stay playing into sixth form, into university, and into adult life, amateur, semi-pro, professional. And that comes down to education and grassroots. It's the same for journalism. It's the same for any industry. Grassroots investment when you're young pays off down the track. And unfortunately, yes, they are. It's compulsory. Sports teams are compulsory until you're 16 rather than 14, because PE is there as a GCSE and an A level, but also you have the sports teams, and sport is actually on bang your timetable. It was always on your timetable. You had to do it until you were 16. And then if you had other activities such as working in the community, public service, then you could opt out. But it's kept on for 2 extra years. And this is the difference. Is specialist state schools and private schools, they encourage more sport. So if you're from a more affluent background, or you're going to a better funded state school or college, you're more likely to carry on sport. So the inner city areas, you're less likely. That's across the board. And that again comes down to funding and grassroots. And now we're becoming political now, because this is on the education secretary and the shadow education secretaries and education spokesmen of the political parties to do something and put pressure on the government, or the government to come up with a white paper. And this is where sport and politics should get involved, is amateur, youth, and grassroots funding, rather than the professionals making political statements and getting involved in the politics and political protests. This is where politics and sport can work, and that's in youth funding for youth facilities and school facilities. Whereas what we're seeing is the wrong type of sport political mix, which is a very fine line where it can go from positive to very divisive and very negative. And unfortunately, it's sort of swaying more towards the negative, divisive, rather than at grassroots level, encouraging kids from all backgrounds to stay active, encouraging kids from, all orientations to get active and involved. It's the other way around. It's from the top down, and it doesn't work. It seems to be forced rather than encouraged. There you go. But unfortunately, that's my political viewpoint. I think it needs to be more funding, especially in a city and urban areas or regions of the country that have less economic, like the West Country, parts of the West Country, like as I say, Cornwall is the lowest average salaries in Cornwall. Parts of Essex have individual towns and villages in Essex have a low annual salary, but as a whole authority, Cornwall was the lowest salary. Clacton-on-Sea, for example, and a few of the coastal towns in Essex also have very low median incomes. And you've got to look at the urban and rural areas that are more deprived and encourage facilities there, including after school clubs, and actually put some funding in. I think that's where we're going wrong in this country, massively. And a lot of Western Europe is also going wrong. Like you look at inner city France with the schools, they don't have playing fields. They have a little concrete square, and that's their sport facility. They don't have swimming pools and netball courts and tennis courts, basketball courts and playing field. They have a little tarmac square in the middle of the building. That's all they have to, do any kind of physical activity. Italy's the same. It's more individual sports clubs rather than on the curriculum. But that's where the community sport club comes in, so the cultural differences, but education is key. Absolutely key. And yeah, I could bang on and bang on and bang on about this, but at this current time, this is going to be crucial going forward because there's the debate about schools and will they be able to return and open fully, phase one. This is where post-coronavirus, when we come out of this pandemic and we find a solution and a vaccine or a way to inoculate and mitigate the risk, this is where sport's going to be different. Is the grassroots youth level, and will the funding be there? Will the, I think this could be the crossroads when it comes to reaching the top professionally. You got to look at the grassroots, and this is where the concerns are about education and youth facilities and amateur clubs in the senior level struggling going forward. But there we go. I'm going to leave that there. That's been a very interesting live stream. We end up getting a bit political, which is what I try and avoid. But unfortunately, in this case, actually, it made a lot of sense to go down the debate about diversity and participation and funding. And it comes from the bottom. It comes from the grassroots rather than the top. It comes from the bottom. And that's where you increase the diversity and increase the participation and increase the well-being. If you're forcing it from the top and professional athletes are getting political, that's where you get a grey area where it can become divisive. And what I've seen is it's starting to lean towards the more divisive and damaging. Whereas if you put the funding in for the kids and the amateur clubs and the facilities for community clubs and community involvement, you get that diversity that we apparently don't have. And apparently we need. I think the media's overselling stuff and trying to push an agenda, which I don't like. It's why I don't buy newspapers. It's why I don't watch the news as much. I follow, obviously, the breaking headlines, but social media is where you get it unfiltered and uncensored, where people are saying what they feel. And even that's getting shut down, and silenced. So you've got to be careful. I think educational funding and sports funding for youth, amateur, recreational facilities. We had this debate about the ice rink situation across the country with ice arenas and stuff, and how councils should have more running and day-to-day involvement with them. It's not going to go away. And there's growing demand for councils to actually pull their finger out and start taking responsibility for public facilities in private hands. But that's another thing. That's another debate for another day, and quite a lot of anger. I'm not a big fan of the current political situation, but I've become very apolitical. I don't support a political party anymore. I've lost faith in the three main parties over the last 10 years. I feel let down, and that's another thing. That's the lack of engagement. And the best way to do that is at grassroots level by investing in the facilities, and supporting. The school doesn't have the land available, encouraging those after-school clubs and those grassroots facilities, and encouraging the community to buy in and support. And that's where you get diversity from. That's where everyone can join in and feel part of something. And it's forced from the top down. And the media has a big part to play in this. it's becoming very divisive, which is what some people want. But I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for watching. I don't want to end on a sour note, but we've discussed a lot of important things. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the questions, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon. Bosh.